I couldn't imagine starting my day without a large dose of my favorite drug, caffeine. My delivery system of choice happens to be coffee. Not only do I drink at least 2 cups in the morning, but I've also been known to grab a cup later in the day, get me over that afternoon slump, or to help me get some work done at night. And I know I'm not alone. Caffeine is one of the most common and widely used psychoactive drugs in the world. And here in the US, it's consumed by about 90% of all Americans on a daily basis. Caffeine comes from plants, where it acts as a natural pesticide. And most of us are familiar with the common plant-based sources of caffeine, like coffee beans or tea leaves. But there's a lot more sources of caffeine out there than just those two. It's also found in guarana seeds, whose extracts are used in a wide variety of energy drinks, as well as yerba mate leaves, coca beans, and cola nuts, which were used in the past to add flavor to soft drinks. Caffeine was first isolated by a German chemist way back in 1819, and in its extracted form, it's a bitter-tasting white crystalline alkaloid that's also chemically known as 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine. Now you might be wondering, how does an innocent-looking powder like this have such stimulating effects on my body? There's actually 2 key points to unlock the mystery, and the first is solubility. Caffeine happens to be both water and lipid soluble, which means that it can mix in your bloodstream for transport around your body. And it also can cross the blood-brain barrier very easily, giving it access to your nervous system. And the second point is that chemically, caffeine is very similar to other naturally occurring molecules in your body. Every minute that you're awake, a molecule called adenosine builds up in your nervous system, and its levels are monitored by receptors in your brain. Now, binding of adenosine to these receptors will slow and suppress brain activity, and will eventually start nudging you towards sleep. Now, when caffeine enters the picture, it can function as a supremely talented adenosine imposter. It'll head right for the same receptors and bind to them, but without the same drowsy effect that adenosine has. This is an example of a process called competitive inhibition, where caffeine competes with and inhibits adenosine from binding the same receptor. And the overall result is delayed fatigue and an increased alertness. So caffeine is not a direct stimulant. It works by playing defense and blocking other molecules that would make you feel drowsy. But that's not exactly the whole story, because it also promotes the activity of other stimulating and mood-enhancing molecules in your brain, like glutamate and dopamine. And it's this interaction with dopamine specifically which is the reason why caffeine makes you feel good. It might also be the reason why you feel slightly addicted to it. But that's not even the whole story, because at the same time, your pituitary gland sees all of this nervous system activity and it thinks there's got to be some sort of emergency. So it begins releasing hormones to tell your adrenal gland to start producing epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline. Now this is your fight or flight hormone, and it has a whole bunch of physiological changes in your body. Adrenaline will make all of your muscles tense up, your airways dilate, and it also causes your liver to secrete stored sugar into your bloodstream for that extra little boost of energy that you might need. It also has a dramatic impact on your circulatory system by constricting blood vessels all over your body and also increasing your blood pressure and your heart rate, which is actually pretty noticeable to some people after they've had caffeine. Well, I'm primed now and ready for action. So now what? Well, now comes the classic caffeine crash. Caffeine peaks about 30 minutes after ingestion and has a half-life of about 6 hours in the human body, which means that if my morning cup of coffee has about 200 milligrams of caffeine, there's only about 100 milligrams left by the time 3 o'clock rolls around. And as it wears off, my dopamine levels are dropping, so my mood is shifting, and I have this backlog of adenosine just waiting to bind those free receptors, making me feel even more tired than I was before. So I guess it's time for my afternoon cup of coffee. It's really a vicious cycle. So this raises the question, is caffeine actually addictive? I mean, I feel like I need it. Well, it sort of is, but technically it's not, because it doesn't trigger the same reward circuitry in your brain that other addictive substances do. So it's generally recognized as safe. Caffeine ingestion is definitely more of a dedicated habit. And if you decide to go without it, you'll probably just have a headache or feel a little cranky. So your brain chemistry is off for about a day or two, but you'll survive. But I really like my caffeine. So is it possible that I can have too much? Could I actually overdose on caffeine? Well, thankfully, the answer is no. Now, the recommended daily intake of caffeine is under 300 milligrams, which is about the amount you find in two 12-ounce cups of coffee. Now, a toxic dose would be somewhere in the order of about 7 to 10 grams for an adult, which means you'd need about 50 cups of coffee to begin to reach that lethal dose. Now, the problem with that is you'd have to consume all of that caffeine at once. And thankfully, your body has mechanisms in place that prevent against that type of excessive consumption. So your stomach would never be able to hold that volume of liquid. And in fact, that caffeine alertness that we like so much in such high doses would begin to turn into disorientation and hallucinations. So then there's that. Now maybe you're like me. I can drink a cup of coffee or tea and then head right off to bed and not have any problem whatsoever. But some people can't. Now this is what we call caffeine sensitivity, and it's determined by how efficiently your body will metabolize and eliminate caffeine. It's based on the activity of a liver enzyme that will process that caffeine, as well as the type of adenosine receptor that you have and how tightly caffeine can bind to it, both of which are determined by a person's genetic makeup. So whether it comes in the form of coffee or tea, energy drinks or soda, remember that caffeine is a drug that has some pretty profound effects on your body. And even though it probably won't kill you, it's always a good idea to caffeinate yourself wisely. Remember, science bonds us.